David Hume was a Scottish philosopher and historian who is considered one of the most important figures in the Western philosophical tradition. Here are a few of his famous quotes along with brief explanations. Reason is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions. Hume argues that reason alone cannot motivate action, but that it must be guided by our desires and emotions. Our passions are what give us the drive to pursue our goals and fulfill our desires, and reason is simply a tool that we use to achieve those ends. Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them. Hume believed that beauty is a subjective experience that depends on the individual's perception and emotional response. He argued that there is no inherent beauty in objects themselves, but rather that beauty is created by the observer's appreciation and interpretation of them. Custom is the great guide of human life. Hume believed that human behavior is largely determined by habit and tradition, rather than by reason or natural law. He argued that people are shaped by their cultural environment and social norms, and that customs and traditions provide a framework for understanding the world and making decisions. Truth springs from argument amongst friends. Hume believed that intellectual progress can only be achieved through the exchange of ideas and the testing of arguments. He believed that constructive debate and discussion among colleagues is the best way to arrive at the truth, rather than relying on dogma or authority. No testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle, unless the testimony be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish. Hume was famously skeptical of claims of supernatural events and miracles, arguing that they should be judged according to the principles of evidence and probability. He believed that miraculous claims should be subjected to rigorous scrutiny and that the burden of proof should always rest with the claimant. The life of man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster. Inherently superior to other forms of life, and that our existence is ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. He argued that our sense of self-importance is a product of our own subjective perspective, rather than any objective reality. A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. Hume believed that critical thinking and skepticism are essential to the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. He argued that we should only believe things that are supported by sufficient evidence, and that we should be open to revising our beliefs in light of new evidence. The ultimate standard by which we judge all controversies in philosophy, as well as in religion, is always derived from common sense and experience. Hume believed that the principles of common sense and empirical observation are the foundation of all knowledge and understanding. He argued that our beliefs should be grounded in our everyday experiences, and that we should always be willing to test our ideas against the evidence. The mind is a kind of theater, where several perceptions successively make their appearance, pass, repass, glide away, and mingle in an infinite variety of postures and situations. Hume believed that the mind is not a unified, stable entity, but rather a constantly changing stream of sensations and perceptions. He argued that our sense of self and personal identity is a product of our subjective experience, rather than any objective reality. It is not contrary to reason to prefer the destruction of the whole world to the scratching of my finger. Hume believed that our moral judgments are ultimately based on our desires and emotions, rather than on objective principles or rules. He argued that what is good, or bad, depends on our subjective perspective and that there is no absolute moral standard that applies universally to all people. All knowledge degenerates into probability. Hume believed that all knowledge is ultimately based on probability, rather than absolute certainty. He argued that we can never be completely certain about anything, and that our beliefs are always subject to revision in light of new evidence. The true standard of beauty is utility. Hume believed that the value of art and aesthetic objects depends on their usefulness and practicality, rather than their inherent beauty. He argued that objects that serve a useful purpose, such as tools or buildings, are ultimately more beautiful than purely decorative objects. It is not reason which is the guide of life, but custom. Hume believed that our behavior is largely determined by habit and tradition, rather than by conscious reasoning. He argued that our cultural environment and social norms shape our attitudes and beliefs, and that we often act without fully understanding our own motivations.